The war in Ukraine has entered its fifth year, and it has been devastating. The Ukrainians have taken somewhere around 500,000 casualties, and the Russians well over 1 million. Since the war broke out in 2022, nearly 5 million Ukrainians fled to EU countries. The scale of the war is hard to wrap your head around. I mean, we're talking about nearly 2 million casualties total. It's comparable to battles from World War One or World War Two. There's now a discussion, unfortunately, about sending certain Ukrainians back to Ukraine. And those specific Ukrainians are, of course, men, military aged men between the ages of 23 and 60. Now, Ukraine has asked Europe to help in bringing them back because, of course, they need the men. And, who can blame Ukraine, right? They're in a position of oh, war for survival. They need everyone doing their part, and that includes men who have fled as refugees. Only around 20% of Ukrainians living in the EU are military-aged men. I mean, you hear the phrase a lot from anti-immigration folks, but it is only a minority. But, they number somewhere around 1 million, right? And that's a huge reserve of men that Ukraine wants to tap into. And so, with that in mind, I wanted to read this article from Euronews. Could military age Ukrainian men lose temporary protection status in Germany? Ukrainian men in military age between 23 and 60 who arrive in the EU could lose their automatic temporary protection status under a European Commission proposal backed by Germany's Interior Minister. The proposal would allow the measure to be introduced across the bloc if requested by the Ukrainian government. In an interview with the Ukrainian news agency Ukrinform, Ukraine's ambassador to Germany said Berlin and Kiev are discussing ways to encourage Ukrainian men living in Germany to return home. Asked about plans to deport conscription-age Ukrainians, whom Kiev considers to have left the country illegally, the ambassador said, I am not going to reveal these mechanisms yet. According to Germany's Central Register of Foreign Nationals, more than 1.3 million Ukrainians are currently living in Germany, the vast majority under temporary protection. Figures from the Interior Ministry, obtained by the German press agency, show that as of 31st of May this year, 265,000 men were aged between 23 and 60. Across the European Union, that figure is estimated at around 1.15 million. Asked by Euronews how any changes to the temporary protection regime would affect Ukrainian men already living in Germany, Germany's Federal Office for Migration and Refugees, BAMF, said asylum claims would continue to be assessed on an individual basis. A BAMF spokesperson said the decisive factors are the reasons an applicant gives for seeking protection and the risk they would face if they return to Ukraine. The agency said it applies the legal standards set out in the Geneva Refugee Convention and the EU Qualification Directive, but stressed that no one is granted protection automatically. That also applies to deserters and conscientious objectors who refuse to take part in the war. Under the Geneva Refugee Convention and the EU Directive, a person may have a well-founded fear of persecution if they refuse to participate in an armed conflict that breaches international law. In such cases, persecution may be recognized on the grounds of political opinion or membership of a particular social group, such as deserters. He added that protection is granted only where an individual can demonstrate a well-founded fear of persecution, meaning every application must be examined on its own merits. The BAMF declined to say whether it considers those criteria to be met in the case of Ukrainian conscientious objectors. So this is just outright sexism. I mean, maybe that would annoy some people hearing me say that, but the idea that young men, not even young men, I mean up to 60, don't have the right to apply for asylum, but women of that age group do. It's just blatant sexism. You can't draw a line around who can apply for refugee status based on gender and age. I think that's just blatant discriminatory, to be honest. And I think it sets a terrible precedent. I think if the EU actually wants to live by its values, it shouldn't do that. Not even a little bit. Now, again, from Ukraine's perspective, I totally understand why the government is asking the EU. But I mean, I just think it's one of the most blatantly sexist ideas, like men are expendable for some reason. Another aspect of this that really annoys me is the fact that it's coming from Germany. There's a lot of polling on how Germans would react if they were attacked. It says here Surveys suggest that willingness to fight varies considerably across Europe. According to the Polish Polling Institute, around 40 to 50% of Poles said they would defend their country with weapons if it came under attack. By contrast, a German one found that only 16% of Germans would definitely take up arms, while 59% said they would probably not or certainly not. If this poll is any way reliable, a majority of Germans would also flee instead of fight. They would just be like those Ukrainian men who don't want to die in a ditch. Perfectly valid and well within their rights. A lot of anti-immigration folks are going to love this. They're already talking all the time about military-aged men taking over Europe. But I hate this. It's just blatant sexism. It's discriminatory. And if the EU gives a shit about its values, it shouldn't go down this road. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. And I'll see you next time.